Here is a bone. It is 3,000 years old. It belonged to someone who never touched a cigarette, never ate processed food, never sat under fluorescent lights for 10 hours straight. And inside that bone, preserved across 30 centuries, is a tumor. That should not make sense to us. But it does. Because we have been telling ourselves a story. A comfortable one. The story goes like this. Cancer is a disease of modernity. It is the price we pay for pollution, bad food, sedentary lives, and industrial civilization. It is what happens when humans stop living naturally. That story is not entirely wrong. But it is not entirely right either. And the gap between what we believe about cancer and what ancient bones actually show us, that gap is where things get genuinely strange. So let us go back. Not to last year, not to the Industrial Revolution. Let us go back 2 million years, before cities, before agriculture, before everything we blame for this disease. And let us ask the question honestly. Did ancient humans get cancer? The short answer is yes. The longer answer changes everything. To understand why this matters, strip away the clinical language and get to the basics. Cancer is simply this: your own cells reproducing out of control. Your body's own machinery, making copies of itself faster than the system can manage. It is not an invasion from outside. It is a rebellion from within. And that rebellion is not new. Not even close. Scientists have found evidence of cancer in dinosaur bones. Specimens 70, 80, 90 million years old show irregular bone growth consistent with malignant tumors. A hadrosaur, a duck-billed dinosaur, had what appears to be metastatic cancer. A creature with no processed food, no pollution, no stress from a 40-hour work week. Cancer. They found it in ancient fish. In insects preserved in amber. Cancer may be as old as multicellular life itself. As old as the moment the first organism figured out how to divide and replicate. Which raises an obvious question. If cancer existed long before humans, long before pollution and sugar and desk jobs, then what is the modern world actually doing to us? And what did ancient humans actually experience? Let us look at the evidence honestly. In 2010, a widely cited study examined Egyptian mummies and ancient skeletal remains going back thousands of years. The conclusion made headlines everywhere. Cancer was rare in ancient populations. This was proof, the headlines said, that cancer is a modern disease. The paleo diet industry loved it. Documentaries were made, supplements were marketed. There was just one problem. The conclusion was almost certainly wrong. Here is the issue. Soft tissue cancers, the ones affecting lungs, stomach, colon, liver, pancreas, leave almost no trace in skeletal remains. A tumor that destroyed someone's liver 3,000 years ago is simply gone. Decomposed, invisible to us. We cannot find what does not leave a mark on bone. So when researchers looked at ancient bones and found relatively few cancer lesions, they were looking at an inherently incomplete record and drawing a very complete-sounding conclusion. Which is a pattern worth noting, because it happens constantly in science communication. When you look specifically at what the record can show, you find something different. Ancient Egyptian medical texts, some of the oldest documents ever discovered, describe tumors explicitly. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, written around 1600 BCE, describes bulging tumors of the breast and states plainly that there is no treatment. 3,600 years ago, Egyptian physicians had already encountered cancer, documented it, struggled with it, and admitted defeat. Ancient Greek and Roman physicians wrote about cancer at length. The word itself comes from the Greek karkinos, meaning crab, because physicians noticed that tumors had projections extending outward like crab legs. Hippocrates described it. Galen theorized about it. These were not men observing something new. They were documenting something they had seen repeatedly across generations. In 2014, researchers studying a skeleton found in a Sudanese tomb, a young adult who lived around 1300 BCE, identified multiple lesions across the bones consistent with metastatic cancer. The lesions were on the collar bones, shoulder blades, upper arms, vertebrae, ribs. This was a person whose body had been overtaken by cancer more than 3,000 years ago. And in 2016, researchers described cancer lesions found in hominin bones from cave sites in South Africa. These were ancient human relatives, dating back somewhere between 1.7 and 3 million years ago. 3 million years of cancer. Before language, before fire, before anything we recognize as civilization. Now here is where the story gets complicated. Because none of this means the modern world has not made cancer worse. It has. The data on that is not subtle. The World Health Organization estimates that in 2020, there were approximately 19 million new cancer cases globally. By 2040, that number is projected to exceed 30 million. That is a real acceleration. Not a statistical illusion. But here is the part that most cancer narratives skip over. How much of that rise is the modern environment creating more cancer, and how much is simply the fact that we have stopped dying of everything else? The single biggest risk factor for cancer is age. The longer a cell lives and divides, the more opportunities it has to accumulate the genetic errors that trigger malignant growth. In ancient populations, average life expectancy was dragged down brutally by infant mortality and infectious disease. The people who survived childhood often lived into their 50s and 60s. But they were also dying of things that no longer kill us: smallpox, cholera, typhoid, tuberculosis. Modern medicine eliminated those killers, and in their absence, the diseases of old age moved to the front of the line. This is not a comfortable thought. It implies that rising cancer rates are partly a byproduct of medical success. That we have extended life long enough for cancer to become the thing that ends it. But let us be precise about what modern life actually does to cancer risk. This is not a both sides situation. Tobacco is responsible for approximately 30% of all cancer deaths in developed countries. 1 in 3 cancer deaths. From a product mass marketed through most of the 20th century by companies that knew it was lethal and spent enormous money obscuring that fact. That part of the cancer story is not ambiguous. Alcohol causes cancer. Multiple types. Breast, liver, colorectal, esophageal. The World Health Organization classifies it as a Group 1 carcinogen, same category as asbestos and formaldehyde. Yet it is marketed as a lifestyle product, advertised during sporting events, associated culturally with celebration and romance. Obesity increases risk for at least 13 types of cancer. Air pollution, particularly fine particulate matter from burning fossil fuels, is a documented lung carcinogen. Certain industrial chemicals, certain pesticides, certain radiation exposures all carry real, measurable risk. So yes, the modern world has added genuine carcinogenic pressure onto human lives. It is real, it matters, but the ancient bones tell us something that should sit alongside that knowledge. Cancer is not something civilization invented. It is something we inherited, from creatures who were dying of it before the first human ever stood upright on a savanna. Here is the strange irony buried in all of this. The same biological mechanism that makes cancer possible is also what allowed complex life to evolve. Evolution works because cells can change, because genetic copying is imperfect, because errors sometimes produce something better adapted to its environment. Cancer is evolution happening in real time inside a single body. A cellular lineage acquiring mutations, outcompeting its neighbors, adapting to treatment, developing resistance. This is why cancer is so extraordinarily difficult to treat. You are not fighting a static enemy. You are fighting something that learns. Something that changes shape when you attack it. Targeted therapies that work brilliantly for a year can stop working because the tumor has evolved around them. The cancer has done what life always does. It adapted. We are using the tools of intelligence against the tools of evolution. And evolution has a 3 billion year head start. So let us assemble the honest picture. Cancer is ancient. It predates humans by tens of millions of years. It exists in the fossil record of creatures that ate perfectly clean and moved constantly. Ancient humans got cancer. Egyptian physicians documented it. Greek physicians theorized about it. Bodies preserved across millennia carry its signature in their bones. 3 million years ago, our human relatives showed evidence of it in a South African cave. The modern world has amplified cancer risk in real and documented ways. Tobacco is the most devastating example. Alcohol, obesity, pollution, all significant, all quantified. But the dominant popular story, that cancer is essentially a modern invention, that ancient and pre-modern populations largely avoided it, that we created this disease through civilizational excess, is wrong. It is a comforting story. It lets us locate the problem entirely in choices and systems rather than in the deep biology of what it means to be alive. The truth is harder. Cancer is woven into the fabric of complex life. You cannot eradicate something that is part of the machinery of existence itself. You can understand it better. You can interrupt it more precisely. You can catch it earlier and treat it more humanely. But the dream of a world completely without cancer may be exactly that, a dream. A modern one, built on the belief that all old enemies eventually surrender to enough money and intelligence. The bones suggest otherwise. Somewhere in Sudan, a young person died around 1300 BCE with tumors spreading through their skeleton, leaving marks that a researcher would find more than 3,000 years later and recognize immediately. That person had no name in the record. No treatment, no clinical trial, no survival statistics. They had a disease that was old when their civilization was new. We have built an enormous, sometimes brilliant, sometimes deeply flawed machine around that same disease. We have learned things that would have seemed miraculous to ancient physicians. We have saved millions of lives. We have also, in certain ways, found profitable reasons not to ask certain questions too loudly. The question worth sitting with is not whether cancer is ancient or modern. It is both. The question is whether we are fighting it honestly, or whether we have gotten so comfortable with the machines built around it that we have quietly stopped asking what winning would actually look like. The ancient bones do not have an answer for that. They just have the evidence. Patient, 3,000 years old, waiting for someone to look at them without flinching.